So there are some main ingredients whenever you're making a coffee. You need to have the coffee. This is a Colombian coffee from Mountaineer Roasting, and it's imported by Caravello Coffee Roasters, roasted by Marshall from Mountaineer Roasting. It's delicious coffee. You need to have a brewing device and a filtration system. So this is going to be the filter that I use for the Chemex. This is the brewer that I'm going to use. This filter is special because it's really dense and it removes a lot of the sediment and oils, so it makes a really clean cup of coffee. Then you want to have a recipe and a scale because you want to make sure you get your recipe as exact as possible. Grams in and grams out, so try to get a scale that measures grams as opposed to ounces or pounds. Being as exact as possible when you're making a small scale coffee makes your coffee taste better. And then the most important ingredient, 98% of coffee, is water. So you need to make sure that the water quality that you're using is good. A lot of people think that they can just use tap water and they don't really know what the contents of their tap water is. So a good brand to use is Gerber Baby brand. You want to make sure that the total dissolved solids, is called TDS, is a good measurement for extracting the flavors that you want from a coffee. So always take into consideration the quality of water. Don't use distilled water because there's no minerals in that, and minerals are needed in order to extract good flavors. So big part of coffee, water. Another important thing, equipment-wise, is your grinder. If you use a blade grinder or a hand grinder, I would recommend a hand grinder between the two because it gets more exact grind size. If you grind with sizes that are too big and too small, then you don't have an even extraction. You want a consistency in grind size. And the grind size is what affects the time that you'll brew. So the finer the grind, you want it to brew faster because there's more surface area. The coarser the grind, you want it to sit in the coffee in the water longer because it needs more time to extract. I always recommend rinsing the filter before you brew to remove any chance of getting any papery taste in your coffee. And then dumping that water because you don't want your coffee to be weak and papery tasting. The recipe that I'm using right now is I'm using 20 grams of coffee and I'm going to use 320 grams of water. Generally, we like our coffees in the United States at a 1:16 ratio. For every gram of coffee, use 16 grams of water.
And this is for 1 cup?
This is for 1 cup. But experiment with it. That's something that's fun about coffee, is it's completely up to your palate. You can have more coffee if you want a more concentrated cup, something a little bit heavier on the body, or you can use less coffee if you like something a little bit weaker. Alright. I'm also going to be timing my brew. Grind size affects the time that you want to brew. So with the grind setting that I have right now, I'm going to aim for 3.5 to 4 minutes. And I use water just off boil, but that's something else that if you have a timer, experiment with water temperatures, anywhere between 195 and 210 off boil. If you get water that's too hot, it's going to scald the coffee, and if you use water that's too cold, it's not going to make a complete extraction. Right now I'm at 204. Alright. Start the timer as soon as I start adding water to it. Coffee holds twice its weight in water. So I'm going to initially just add twice the amount of grams that I use. So if I'm using 20 grams of coffee, I'm going to aim for 40 grams of water. And I'm stirring it because coffee releases gases whenever you first add water to it. And you want it to release all of those gases so it can make an extraction. It's not going to extract properly while it's releasing the gases because gases create kind of a protective barrier around the coffee. Alright, and after about 30 seconds, that'll depend on the freshness and the roast of the coffee, I'm going to pour gently to about 150 grams of water. And let it settle. There's not one universal method for all the different coffees that's going to create the best cup. Experiment with it. If you ever watch brewing competitions, there are thousands of different ways that you can brew a cup. And some people say let the bed of coffee go dry before you add more water. Some say never let the bed go dry. Coffee is fun because you can experiment with it to get a cup that suits your palate, and that's really what matters. When brewing coffee, flavors extract at different rates. So in the beginning of the brewing cycle, a lot of the flavors that you're extracting are going to be the more fruity and floral, more delicate flavors. And then as it goes on, it starts extracting the sugars and caramel flavors, and then the chocolates. And the longer it brews, the closer it gets to extracting more ashy and medicinal flavors. That's whenever coffees start to taste bitter. So having a good time of brewing is important to eliminate those medicinal bitter flavors. This coffee is a Colombian and it's fantastic on pour over. I don't think that there is just one type of coffee that works better for pour over, but it's understanding that with each different coffee, you have to dial it in to make it taste good, which means you have to refine your recipe. Coffee oxidizes really fast, and so by swirling it, I'm introducing or I'm letting air get out of it, so it doesn't go bad as quickly. Yeah, it's like a chemistry experiment. But then there's also the fun of experimenting with creating different flavor profiles, and I feel like that is kind of where the artisanship comes in. Being willing to be creative, and while we have a recipe that we go to first brew a coffee, being willing to step out of that recipe comfort zone and do something completely different.